Welcome everyone to a new video. I'm Firelinks. You know me as the creator of the Pepsi Cup series. It's why you're probably watching this channel, to be completely honest right now, because you watch the Pepsi Cup series. But this is a new kind of video where you actually get to see my face and my beautiful Penn State whiteout jersey, or not jersey, hoodie. And I'm going to talk about something. And as you could probably tell from the title, the something I'm going to be talking about is what makes a NASCAR stop motion good. In my opinion. If you were to ask somebody like Speed Cup Stop Motion or Gavin Beers, they'd probably have a different response because that's their opinion. That's how opinions work. Starting off, we're going to just go through some basic things that obviously could increase, interactions, viewership, whatever, but they don't really actually make the stop motion itself too much better. It'll make it look nicer, but not necessarily, it's not needed for the race itself. First thing, the big thing, when you think of nicer quality stop motions, the tracks, right? I mean, if you're putting money into tracks to make banking and making the surface look good, that's obviously going to look a lot better and make the stop motion automatically better than somebody who's just doing it on their carpet. Another thing that also can make the stop motions better, this is more important than the tracks if you ask me, is just the general quality of the die casts being used. Like, don't take cars that to film a race. Obviously, if it's all you have, it's fine. But don't take cars to film a race that you played around with when you were like 3 or 4 years old, and they're scratched up and look like they've been to hell and back. That's just not. It doesn't look as good. You don't want to see those scratches on the cars. And honestly, I have a lot of them. I have a lot. Pretty much all of my Gen 5 diecasts look like that because I was, 4 or 5 when the Gen 5 was racing Car Tomorrow. But yeah, that's why I don't use those diecasts. That's why some of my earlier stuff, some of my Gen 6 cars, they look like that too. Like if there was any 2013 or 14 Gen 6 cars in any of my races, they look like crap because I would beat them up when I was a kid because I didn't know any better. And now some of those cars are really, really rare. And I regret ever doing anything like that. But still, diecast quality, pretty important if you ask me. I think those first two features are something that most people agree on, the general consensus. This next one is something that I think is more me and not necessarily other people. And this is something that I do. It's focusing on the pre and post race production aspect of the races. Some people obviously tests, like if you're making a test stop motion, you don't need this. You don't really need anything, to be honest, other than a stop motion and maybe a track. But pre and post race goes a long way, if you ask me. Having it be realistic, don't do what I did with my Daytona 500. That was excessive. And honestly, I'm obviously going to have pretty good pre and post race the rest of the season. But, you're not going to have to wait until the 30-minute mark of the video for the green flag again, more than likely. Don't make your pre race as long. Like, you also want to balance it. You don't want the pre and post race to be the bulk of the video. Like, at least in my Daytona race, the pre-race was excessive. It was 30 minutes in a 55-minute video. But at least, there was racing. Don't make it where you have a 25-minute pre-race, a 2-minute race, and then another 20 minutes of post-race. That's bad. That's no good. People come for the racing, and the pre-race and the post-race should just elevate the racing. Like, it should add on, kind of. So don't do what I did at Daytona. The last point of the non-stop motion, really, part I want to talk about here. The less important, but still important aspect, the graphics. You want to have a good graphics package if you're doing actual races. Again, if it's a test, you don't need this. Just disregard this, unless you're doing a graphics test, obviously. But you want to have decent graphics. You don't want to have my seasons 1 to 5 graphics where there's either none at all or it's a complete eyesore and it looks really bad. You want to have decent graphics that, will keep the viewer engaged, and you want to have a good amount of information, but not too much either. Lap count, maybe race name, and then leaderboard. I do top 5, probably a bit on the low side, maybe top 10, something like that. There are even people who do top 20. It's a lot more work, but if you want to do it, do it. I mean, nobody's stopping you, and it'll definitely, increase, I guess, the quality of your race. So graphics can be a big help. Now we get on to the actual stop motion production. The actual racing itself, not necessarily yet, but this is when you're filming things you should focus on. First thing is obviously more pictures are better. And here's why. Obviously, it'll decrease choppiness, which is a big thing. I'll touch on that in a minute once I get through this, but more pictures means you're probably making smaller movements with the cars, which is good. You don't really want to go over one wheel rotation, I guess. I don't know what to call it, but I have an SVG diecast right here. So see how the wheel's like on the edge of the screen, and right here is where it ends. If you go to like here, that's about the max movement you want to make. Unless, something's happening and like a car's making a pass and you need to go a tiny bit over that. That'll be fine, but you usually don't want to go over that as a common rule of thumb. And that'll allow you to add more pictures, create a longer race, and also, it'll also decrease choppiness, which is another big thing. If you're using Stop Motion Studio, you can have frame overlays. You can also go back and see what the race looks like as you're filming a shot. So you could see if one car does like that thing where it's choppy and it goes back and forth a lot. You can fix that stuff so it doesn't look as choppy and the overall production looks better. Because you don't want that. Choppy racing doesn't look that great. So now, I mentioned already that taking more photos will allow you to increase frame rate and, get smoothness out of the way, but it will also create longer races, which is another thing I want to touch on. And now we're getting into there are 2 parts of longer races, and now we're getting into kind of the second part of that, which is increasing the amount of laps you're doing, which is something I've started to do now. I was one of those guys who was always like, if I can upload more races, even if they're short, it's better. Maintain a consistent schedule of like every 2 weeks or so uploading a race. I don't necessarily go by that anymore. First thing that longer races does is it allows you to incorporate pit strategy into your races. Even if there aren't green flag pit stops, having a race that's at Daytona 20 or 25 laps instead of 10, it allows you to add a fuel window, get some pit strategy going, and make tires more important, and just a whole bunch of things that a lot of people don't necessarily do. You could have comers and goers as the race goes on, as strategies change. You'll see a lot of that in the future races that I haven't filmed yet. It's tough to do that at Daytona because obviously it is Daytona, and outside of the fuel, tires don't matter with this next gen car at all. But you will see in future races lots of different strategies, multiple strategies in the same race. So, you're going to have guys 20th and 30th who are back there because they're on a different strategy that might get them up to the front at the end of the race for a good result as other people pit. Even if there's not necessarily green flag pit stops, under caution, splitting the field in two, seeing if the fresh tires will eventually push to the front towards the end of the race and pass those guys on older tires. That could be something you can do to really help the racing as things go on. And obviously, I touched on this a little bit. You can add fuel mileage too. Imagine if you get one of those races where it either goes green or there's like 15 overtimes at the end, like in every Indianapolis race ever in real life. You can, create an interesting fuel mileage race. Fuel mileage is something that would obviously be fantastic to have, but in order to have most fuel mileage situations, you have to have longer runs. And now I'm going to go on a bit of a rant, because this is something I saw today, actually, the day I'm filming this, when watching, just going around watching stop motions, like I do sometimes, like everybody does sometimes. They'll look up stop motions. There are people out there who, sometimes the races aren't so bad, but there's no long green flag runs anywhere, Like, it's just so, I wouldn't say disappointing, but I guess it is kind of disappointing when, you're looking at a race, great track, great smoothness, all of that, and then the longest green flag run of the race is a lap and a half. Like, you can do better than that. I get time is an issue sometimes, but even if you don't have a lot of time, nobody's gonna do anything. Nobody's gonna get mad if you take 3.5 months to make a race, if it means you can make it better than a race you can make in a month. Like, sometimes longer green flag runs are better. People want to see racing, not cautions all the time. Creating longer runs is a good thing. Obviously, it will definitely, make people like your stop motions and come back, and it'll, make me think it's a good stop motion too. But you have to do a long run right too, right? I mean, unless it's Daytona or Talladega, or I guess now Atlanta as well, or Fantasy Super Speedway, you need a realistic field spread too. Add lap traffic if you need after, if you're at like a mile and a half, 6 or 7 laps. Have the field catch the back. Obviously, that's way shorter than in real life, but it's a stop motion. The race isn't 350 laps or whatever. The last point I want to make is that not all races are created equal, and not all races should be the same. I've fallen victim to this before in the past, where some of my races are predictable. I know there are other creators out there, big creators too, not, somebody with 100 subscribers who's just getting their feet wet in stop motions, but like, we're talking big creators up at the top where their races can be predictable sometimes because they've done races just like it in the past. You don't want a predictable race. You don't want green flag, 3 laps of green flag racing, caution. Another 3 laps, caution. And that's every race. You don't want to start a pattern of some sort. I've done it on my super speedway races accidentally. I fall into this trap. Green flag, long run, that's 3/4 of the race. Oh no, somebody blows a tire and there's a caution, but they're still in the race. And then on the restart, 1 lap after the restart, oh man, there's a huge wreck. Somebody's flipping into the catch fence. And then there's 15 overtimes and a photo finish. I've fallen victim to that. I've done that before. But don't do that, because people aren't going to watch because they know what's going to happen, right? So don't do that. Some races, this happens in real life, happens more often than not in real life. Some races are more interesting than others. Some races are boring. Some races have the greatest racing you'll ever see. And then there are races that end up like 2013 Daytona, where there's not a single move, it feels like, for the entire race. Obviously, you don't have to go that extreme from 2013 Daytona, where you have to make a race where nobody passes and it's boring, but not every race should have a 3 wide pass for the win at the end, or, even super speedways. Not every super speedway race needs a big one. I think that's really my last point. So, yeah, I know I rambled on quite a lot actually, but if you enjoyed and you enjoy content like this, leave a like and subscribe. I will be going to college soon, so eventually all of this I won't be filming here anymore. I won't be able to film stop motions very often except for winter, spring break, and obviously the summer. So you should be getting a lot more of this content if I ever get off my butt and start editing more often. Um, so yeah, if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I am Firelinks. This has been the Pepsi Cup Series YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed. So long.